I still have the bitter taste of that day in my mouth as if it happened yesterday, not 3 months ago. It was my 65th birthday, a date I always imagined would be celebrated with love and respect by my family. As a widow who dedicated her entire life to her children, I hoped for at least this moment of recognition. But fate, or rather my daughter-in-law Ashley, had other plans for me. I'll never forget the look of disdain on her face when she blew out my candles and shouted for all to hear, "This isn't your day, old lady." And the worst part wasn't the public humiliation, the blatant disrespect, but the laughter. My own son Michael, my grandchildren, they all laughed as if it were the funniest joke in the world. 50 years of caring for my family, giving up dreams, saving every penny, and this was my payment. Being reduced to a laughingstock at my own party. But in that moment, something inside me awakened. I was no longer the docile and submissive Margaret everyone knew. With trembling hands, I picked up my cell phone and made a call. A single call that would forever change the balance of power in the Thompson family. When the voice on the other end answered and I put it on speakerphone, I saw Ashley's smile freeze. Panic filled those arrogant eyes, and for the first time she understood that messing with me would be her biggest mistake. I've always been considered the perfect matriarchal figure. My husband Robert passed away 15 years ago, leaving me with the responsibility of keeping our family together. We were married for 32 years, building a small estate together through hard work and dedication. We had a comfortable home in the Boston suburbs, a paid-off car, and some savings to ensure our peaceful old age. We raised 2 children, Michael, my eldest son, now 42, and Elizabeth, 39, who lives in Seattle and rarely visits. Since Robert's death, I've devoted myself entirely to my children and later to my grandchildren. Michael married Ashley 12 years ago. And together they have 2 adorable children, 10-year-old Emily and 8-year-old Christopher. At first, Ashley seemed like an attentive and caring daughter-in-law. She'd invite me to dinner, ask for children advice, and even suggest family outings. I was genuinely happy that my son had found someone who seemed to value family as much as we did. What an illusion I have. The first signs of change emerged subtly about 5 years after the wedding. Ashley began making ironic comments about my appearance, my cooking, my clothes always disguised as harmless jokes. "Margaret, isn't that blouse a little too young for you?" Or "My mother-in-law still hasn't learned that too much salt is bad for her health, has she, kids?" I swallowed hard and smiled, trying not to create friction. After all, Michael seemed unaware, or worse yet, amused. Over time, the comments became more frequent and cruel. Ashley began excluding me from important family decisions. I only learned about trips, house moves, or grandchildren's school events after everything had already been decided. When I questioned, I received evasive answers. "Oh, we thought you'd be busy. We didn't want to bother you. It was a last-minute decision." Blatant lies that my son corroborated with his complicit silence. The truth is, Ashley was methodically removing me from their lives. In January of this year, the situation took a drastic turn for the worse. Michael lost his job as a sales manager at the company where he'd worked for 15 years. A corporate restructuring, they said. Suddenly, the family's financial stability was threatened. That's when Ashley changed her strategy. Suddenly, she was back to being the attentive daughter-in-law. She'd always been inviting me to dinner 3 times a week and encouraging the kids to spend more time with me. I should have been suspicious, but the hope of regaining my place in the family prevailed. One of those nights after dinner, while the kids were watching television, Michael and Ashley approached me with a proposal that, at the time, seemed sensible. "Mom, we're thinking about selling our house and buying a smaller one to cut expenses while I look for a new job," Michael explained. "But the real estate market is tough right now, and we'd need a down payment to secure a good deal." Ashley added with that smile I now know is fake. "We thought maybe you could lend us some of your savings. You always said this money would be ours one day, didn't you? It would just be an advance on our inheritance." At that moment, I felt a twinge of hesitation, but I quickly shook it off. It was my son and grandchildren who needed help. How could I say no? "How much do you need?" I asked, already mentally calculating how much I could provide without compromising my own security. "About $70,000, Michael replied, avoiding my gaze. It was more than half my savings, the money Robert and I had hoarded for decades, thinking about our peaceful old age. But these were difficult times, and family is family. I'll transfer it to you tomorrow, I promised, ignoring the inner voice warning me. Ashley hugged me warmly, something she hadn't done in years. You're the best mother-in-law in the world, Margaret. The children are so lucky to have a grandmother like you. Her words were music to my ears, thirsting for affection and recognition. I went home that night feeling useful and loved again, unaware that I was walking into a carefully crafted trap. The next day, I transferred the $70,000 to Michael's account as promised. He assured me he would keep me updated on the process of selling our current house and purchasing the new one. But the weeks passed and information became scarce. When I asked about how things were going, I received increasingly vague answers. We're evaluating options, the market is tough, we're in negotiations. I began to notice other worrying signs. Ashley showed up with a new car, a luxury model that certainly wasn't compatible with the financial situation I'd been described as. When I mentioned it, she shrugged. It's just a temporary lease until we sort things out. The children started wearing designer clothes and expensive electronic gadgets. Michael and Ashley began going out to dinner at fancy restaurants, posting photos on social media without any embarrassment. In March, 2 months after the loan, I decided to make a surprise visit. It was a sunny Sunday, and I thought I'd bring a cake for afternoon tea. When I arrived, I found the house empty. I found it strange, as it was rare for anyone to leave without telling me, especially on Sundays, which we usually spend together. I used the key I still had and let myself in. The house was impeccably tidy, but something caught my eye on the dining room table: brochures for resorts in Florida, printed airline tickets for 4 people with departure dates for the following week and return dates 10 days later. A handwritten note from Ashley read, "I've confirmed the upgrade to the presidential suite. This will be perfect for celebrating Michael's new position at Westfield Corp." My heart raced. New position, luxury resort, presidential suite, none of it made sense with the story of financial hardship I'd been told. With trembling hands, I continued investigating. In Michael's office, I found a signed employment contract with Westfield Corporation dated January of this year, the same month I was told he was unemployed. The document detailed a considerably higher salary package than the previous one, including signing bonuses, profit sharing, and extensive benefits. Beside it, a folder contained estimates for a complete renovation of the house, not to sell, but to expand and modernize. Architectural plans showed the addition of a swimming pool, a private movie theater, and a complete kitchen. Renovation with state-of-the-art appliances. The total estimated investment, $68,000. Almost exactly the amount I'd been asked to borrow. The revelation hit me like a punch in the gut. There was no job loss. There was no financial need. There were no plans to move to a smaller house. It was all an elaborate lie to steal my savings and finance unnecessary luxuries. I sat on the couch gasping for breath as the magnitude of the betrayal became clear. My own son, my own family had deliberately deceived me. And worse, they would probably laugh at me behind my back at the foolish old woman who believed the story without question. Tears streamed down my face as I tried to process the pain of the betrayal. I heard the jingle of keys in the door. They were coming back. Quickly, I wiped away the tears and put everything back exactly as it was. I slipped out the back unseen. They didn't even know I was there. That night was one of the longest of my life. Lying in bed, I relived every moment, every lie, every manipulation. How could I have been so blind? How had I missed the signs? Pain gave way to anger and then to profound sadness. I considered confronting them immediately, demanding my money back, exposing the deception. But something told me that wouldn't be the wisest course of action. They would deny it, invent more lies, make me look like a paranoid old woman. I needed to be smarter, gather more information, plan my next steps carefully. I decided that for now, I would pretend nothing had changed. I would remain the loving, naive mother and grandmother they thought I was, while I discovered the true extent of the betrayal and considered my options. Over the next few weeks, I kept up appearances. I continued visiting regularly, doting on the children, smiling at Ashley, pretending to be oblivious to their lies. But I was attentive to every detail, every careless comment, every new clue. I noticed how they avoided discussing the supposed house sale in front of me. I noticed how tense they became when I casually mentioned the borrowed money. I saw the knowing glances they exchanged when they thought I wasn't looking. One afternoon, I overheard Ashley on the phone laughing and telling someone how easy it had been to convince me to invest in their future. The old lady didn't even think twice, she said, as I pretended to be absorbed in playing with Christopher. She's so easy to manipulate when you mention her grandchildren. Each new discovery was like a knife to my heart, but I maintained my composure, accumulating evidence and strengthening my resolve. It was during this period of silent observation that I remembered something important. My late husband, Robert, had a brother, Harold, who worked as an attorney specializing in family law and elder law. We hadn't had much contact after Robert's death, mainly because Ashley had never felt comfortable with him around. Now I understood why Harold had always had a discerning eye and little tolerance for manipulation. I decided to contact him discreetly without alerting Michael or Ashley. At our meeting in a cafe far from their home, Harold listened to my story with growing indignation. "Margaret, this is not only morally reprehensible, it's potentially a crime of financial abuse. Against the elderly," he explained, his expression serious. "They used bad faith emotional manipulation and lies to get your money. We have legal options here." Harold suggested I start documenting everything: conversations, messages, evidence of the lie about employment, evidence of the lavish spending. "And keep it completely confidential for now," he advised. "The element of surprise will be our greatest advantage." Following his advice, I began discreetly recording conversations when I was at their house. On one occasion, I got Michael to casually admit that his new job was going very well, completely forgetting his earlier lie about unemployment. On another, Ashley talked excitedly about the pool they were building while I pretended to be oblivious. "It'll be a surprise for everyone, especially your mother," she told Michael, laughing. "She still thinks we're looking for a smaller house." I photographed important documents when I had the opportunity, including bank statements showing large withdrawals for luxury items and invoices for the construction of the pool and movie theater. Harold was building a solid case, not only for my money back, but potentially for criminal prosecution for fraud. "They have no idea what's coming," he said during our third secret meeting. "What you need to decide now, Margaret, is when and how you want it to happen." While considering my options, I received an invitation to celebrate my 65th birthday at their home. Ashley insisted it would be a special family celebration to mark this important milestone. I hesitated at first. The idea of celebrating anything with people who had betrayed me so deeply seemed repugnant. But then Harold suggested perhaps this is the perfect time to confront them with everyone present. A controlled setting where they won't be able to easily escape the truth. I agreed, though my stomach churned at the thought of the impending confrontation. I accepted the invitation without revealing my true intentions. In the days leading up to the party, I made the necessary preparations. Harold helped me organize all the documents and evidence into a folder. "Take it with you," he suggested, "but keep it locked until the right moment." He also gave me a small recording device to document everything said during the confrontation. "It's legal in Massachusetts," he assured me, "as long as one of the parties to the conversation knows it's being recorded." Importantly, Harold promised to be available by phone throughout, the party ready to intervene if necessary. "One phone call from me," he explained, "and I can immediately begin legal proceedings." I felt empowered knowing I wouldn't be alone in this battle, even if I was physically the only representative of the truth in that room. My birthday arrived sunny and warm, as if the weather mocked the ice I felt in my heart. I dressed carefully, choosing an elegant dress Robert had always loved and a pearl necklace he'd given me for our 20th wedding anniversary. I wanted to feel strong, connected to the man who had always protected and valued me. I put the evidence folder and the recorder in my bag, took a deep breath, and headed to the house I'd once considered my second home, but which now felt like an imminent battlefield. I arrived promptly at 5 o'clock, as agreed. Ashley opened the door with an exaggeratedly wide smile. "Happy birthday, dear mother-in-law," he exclaimed, hugging me with false enthusiasm. The house was modestly decorated, nothing to suggest a special celebration. Michael greeted me absently, his eyes fixed on his phone. The children ran to hug me, the only genuine moment of affection I felt upon entering. The table was set with a simple cake, clearly a last-minute purchase from the local supermarket, and a few basic snacks. Nothing compared to the elaborate parties Ashley threw for her own birthdays or those of close friends. I swallowed my wounded pride and smiled, thanking her for the effort. "It's no big deal," Ashley said, dismissing my thanks. "After all, it's just another birthday, isn't it?" The coldness of her words contrasted with the artificial warmth of her smile. Dinner was a succession of superficial conversations and awkward moments. Michael barely spoke, responding with monosyllables when I tried to engage. The children, sensing the tension, were unusually quiet. Ashley dominated the conversation, talking incessantly about her own projects, her friends, her social life, as if the celebration were about her and not me. Finally, it was time for the cake. Ashley hurriedly lit the candles, not 65, but just a single question mark-shaped candle. "We thought it best not to remind you that you're getting old," she explained with a giggle that made my blood boil. Everyone gathered around the table. It was my moment, I thought. Time to make my wish and blow out the candles. But before I could lean in, Ashley stepped forward. In a quick, deliberate movement, she blew out my candle and declared loudly for all to hear, "This isn't your day, old lady. I'm the one who decides things around here." The silence that followed lasted only a second before they burst into laughter. Michael, my own son, laughed as if it were the funniest joke in the world. The confused children looked from their parents to me, unsure how to react. And then hesitantly they laughed too, imitating the adults. I froze, feeling the blood drain from my face. 50 years dedicated to family, countless sacrifices, all my unconditional love, and this was my payment to be publicly humiliated, turned into an object of ridicule. On a day that should have been one of celebration and respect. Something inside me, something that had been dormant for so long, finally awakened. I was no longer the docile and submissive Margaret everyone knew. I stood up slowly, maintaining what dignity I had left. "You're right, Ashley," I said with a calmness that surprised even myself. "This isn't just my day. It's the day you all will learn an important lesson about respect and consequences." Hands still steady, I pulled my cell phone from my purse. The mocking smiles began to falter, giving way to expressions of confusion. I dialed Harold's number, which was already waiting, and deliberately put it on speakerphone. 3 rings, and then his deep, authoritative voice answered. "Office of Tufts. Attorney Harold Thompson, specializing in elder law and financial abuse." I looked directly at Ashley as I replied, "Hello, Harold, this is Margaret. I'm ready to proceed with that matter we discussed." There was a moment of silence on the other end, and then I see Margaret. "So they kept up the charade until the end. The documents are ready, and I can send the bailiff immediately. The police are also aware of the fraud case we documented." The effect was instantaneous and devastating. I saw the blood drain from Ashley's face. Michael dropped the fork he was holding, making it clink loudly against the plate. The children, sensing something serious was happening, went deathly quiet. "Yes," I replied calmly. "I was just publicly humiliated at my own birthday party, after they used an elaborate lie about unemployment to steal $70,000 of my savings money that was actually used for a pool, a movie theater, and a luxurious vacation in Florida." I paused, letting each word sink in like a stone. "And I have it all documented, the lies, the admissions, the spending. Everything." Harold, fully understanding his role in this dramatic moment, responded with professional precision. "In that case, Margaret, I advise you to leave this house immediately. I will begin legal proceedings immediately. The bailiff should arrive in approximately 30 minutes with the summons, and I must inform you that the district attorney is particularly interested in this case of financial abuse against an elderly woman. The penalties, as you know, can include imprisonment in addition to full restitution of the defrauded funds." I hung up the call and stared at my family in shock. The silence was deafening. Ashley was the first to find her voice, although she was visibly shaking. Margaret, you can't be serious. Is this some kind of sick joke? I don't know what you're talking about. A sick joke? I repeated, slowly savoring every word. Like lying about losing your job to steal my savings. Like planning a luxury trip with my money while telling me stories about financial hardship. Or maybe you're referring to humiliating me at my own birthday party. Which of these would be the sick joke, Ashley? I opened my bag and removed the folder containing the evidence, placing it on the table. Here's everything. Michael's contract with Westfield Corporation dated January, the same month you told me he was unemployed. The budgets for the pool and the movie theater. The reservations for the presidential suite in Florida. The bank statements showing where my money really went. And of course, the recordings of you two laughing at me behind my back, calling me an easy old woman. Michael finally found his voice, though weak and shaky. Mom, we can explain. There's been a misunderstanding. It's not as it seems. I held up my hand, interrupting him. There's nothing to explain, Michael. I know everything. I recorded everything. I documented everything. And now you'll face the legal consequences of your actions. I turned to look at the children who watched the scene with wide, scared, and confused eyes. My heart ached for them. They didn't deserve to witness this. Emily, Christopher, I said softly, why don't you go play in your room while the adults talk? This isn't about you, dears. Grandma will always love you no matter what. After the children left, I turned my attention to Ashley and Michael, who now looked completely unhinged. I have a proposal for you, I said with a calm I hadn't felt before. There are two options. One, you return every penny you took from me with interest by the end of this week. You sign a legal document admitting the fraud and pledging to never do anything like it again. You agreed to family therapy to try to repair the damage you caused. And you begin treating me with the respect I deserve. If you do this, I will ask Harold to drop the legal action and we will try to rebuild something from the ashes. I paused, letting the words sink in. Option 2, you keep the money, go on with your lives as if nothing happened. And I'll move forward with the criminal case for elder fraud with all the negative publicity that will bring. Your new job probably won't survive the scandal, Michael. And that position on the school's parent council you're so proud of, Ashley, it'll probably be lost too. Not to mention the potential criminal consequences. Ashley, ever the manipulator, tried a new approach. Her eyes filled with artificial tears as she grabbed my hand. Margaret, please think about the children. How will they feel if this becomes public, if their friends at school find out if their parents are punished legally? Her audacity left me momentarily speechless. After everything they had done, she was still trying to use my grandchildren as emotional shields. I firmly removed my hand from hers. You should have thought about the children before you deceived their grandmother. Before you stole money that could have been used for their future education. Before you turned your home into an environment where lies and manipulation are normalized. I looked her straight in the eye. And don't you dare use my grandchildren as emotional weapons against me again. This ends today. Michael seemed to have finally grasped the seriousness of the situation. His face was pale and he ran his hand repeatedly through his hair, a nervous gesture I recognized from his childhood. We'll give you the money back, Mom. All of it. Immediately. He looked at Ashley, who started to protest, but he silenced her with a brusque gesture. No, Ashley, it's over. She has everything documented. We can't continue with this. He turned to me, his eyes now genuinely sorry. I'm so sorry, Mom. So deeply. I don't know how I let this happen. How I allowed us to get to this point. His words sounded sincere, but I had been fooled before. Actions speak louder than words, Michael, I replied. You have until the end of the week to prove you're truly sorry. The sound of the doorbell interrupted our conversation. Ashley jumped as if shocked. Is that the bailiff? She asked, panic evident in her voice. Probably, I replied, though I wasn't sure Harold would actually send someone so quickly. I suggest you answer and formally accept the documents. Resisting will only make things worse. Michael walked to the door, moving like a man in shock. When he opened it, it wasn't a bailiff, but Harold himself, holding a folder of documents. Good evening, he said, formally entering uninvited. I'm Harold Thompson, Margaret's attorney. I assume this is Michael and Ashley. I have some documents here that require your immediate attention. Harold's arrival solidified the reality of the situation for both of them. This wasn't a vague threat or a bluff from an angry old woman. This was a serious legal case with potentially devastating consequences. Ashley began to cry for real now. Manipulative tears, but the desperate sobs of someone who finally understood that their actions have consequences. Michael, on the other hand, seemed to have found some semblance of dignity. "We will cooperate fully," he told Harold. "We will do whatever it takes to fix this." Harold nodded gravely, though his eyes betrayed skepticism. "Good. We'll start with these documents," he said, opening his briefcase. "The first is a restitution agreement detailing how and when you will repay the full amount of $70,000 plus 8% interest, totaling $75,600. The second is an admission of willful fraud, which will remain sealed as long as you comply with all conditions of the agreement. The third is a schedule of mandatory family therapy sessions, which will be supervised by a professional of my choosing." As Harold explained the terms of the agreement, I watched Michael and Ashley's expressions. My son seemed resigned, accepting the justice of the situation. Ashley, however, alternated between desperation and calculation, her eyes scanning the documents as if searching for loopholes. "What if we refuse to sign?" she finally asked, her voice a strained whisper. Harold smiled coldly. "In that case, I will immediately turn over this other set of documents to the district attorney, initiating criminal proceedings for elder fraud with a potential penalty of up to 5 years in prison. I will also file a civil lawsuit for pain and suffering, seeking not only restitution of the original amount, but additional compensation for emotional distress, which could easily triple the amount. And of course, all of this will become public record, accessible to anyone who wants to know: employers, neighbors, schools." The silence that followed was absolute. Even Ashley realized she was cornered. With trembling hands, she took the pen Harold offered and signed each document, Michael following suit. When they finished, Harold carefully collected the papers. "Excellent. The first installment of the restitution should be transferred to Margaret's account by noon tomorrow. The first therapy session is scheduled for Wednesday of next week. All the details are here." He handed them copies of the agreements. "Oh, and let me be very clear. Any attempt at retaliation against Margaret, any negative comments, any manipulation involving the children, will result in the immediate release of these documents to the public. Are we clear?" They both nodded silently, the arrogance completely drained from their faces. Harold turned to me. "Margaret, I think we've accomplished what we came here for. Would you like to leave now?" I nodded, feeling strangely exhausted and invigorated at the same time. I grabbed my bag and headed for the door, but stopped when Emily and Christopher appeared timidly on the stairs. "Is Grandma leaving, Christopher?" asked his voice, small and confused. My heart sank. "Yes, honey, Grandma needs to go home now. But I'll be back to see you soon, I promise." Emily, ever the more perceptive, looked from me to her parents. "Is everything okay?" you were yelling. I walked over and hugged them tightly. Sometimes adults need to have difficult conversations to resolve problems, but everything will be okay now. And remember, Grandma loves you more than anything. As Harold walked me to my car, I felt a huge weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one afraid. I wasn't the one feeling powerless. I had regained control of my life, set clear boundaries, and demanded the respect I deserved. I looked at the house one last time before getting in the car. "Do you think it will work?" I asked Harold. "Will they really change?" he sighed, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. "Honestly, I don't know. People like Ashley rarely change fundamentally. But one thing is certain, they will never see you as easy prey again. And that in itself is a significant victory." The next morning at 9 o'clock sharp, I received a wire transfer for $20,000. The first installment of the refund as agreed. Michael sent a brief but polite message: "First installment sent. The remainder will be deposited in the coming weeks as agreed." Again, "I'm so sorry for everything." Didn't respond immediately. I needed time to process everything that had happened, to decide what I wanted my relationship with my son and his family to be like from now on. I had taken back my power, but that didn't mean the wounds were healed or that trust could be easily rebuilt. Over the next few weeks, I noticed significant changes in their behavior. Respectful calls from Michael asking how I was doing if I needed anything. Polite messages from Ashley without the usual condescending tone. Money transfers continued punctually as scheduled. The children were allowed to spend more time with me without constant supervision. In the first family therapy session, the therapist, Dr. Rachel Klein, established clear ground rules of communication and respect. Ashley initially resisted trying to minimize her actions or deflect blame, but Dr. Klein would not tolerate such tactics. We are here to recognize problematic behaviors and work to change them, she said firmly, not to rewrite history or dilute responsibility. Michael, surprisingly, was more open to the process, admitting his passive complicity and expressing a genuine desire to rebuild our relationship. I realized I had lost sight of the values you and my father taught me, he confessed during a particularly intense session. I got carried away by material things, status, appearances. And in the process, I forgot what really matters. The children, of course, noticed the changes in the family dynamic, though no one told them exactly what had happened. Emily asked me one afternoon when I took her out for ice cream, "Grandma, why are Mommy and Daddy being so nice to you now?" "Because they finally understand that respect isn't optional, honey," I replied simply. "It's the foundation of any true relationship." Emily considered this for a moment, her eyes showing a wisdom beyond her years. "Mommy used to say mean things about you when you weren't there," she said hesitantly, as if worried she was betraying a secret. "But she stopped. And now Daddy's home more, and they don't fight as much." I hugged her, my heart simultaneously broken by what she had witnessed and hopeful for these small improvements. "Sometimes people need a reminder to be their best selves," I explained. "And it looks like your Mommy and Daddy got that reminder." But I wasn't fooled. I knew this sudden reverence was largely based on fear of exposure and legal consequences, not necessarily on a genuine moral transformation. It was a fragile truce motivated by self-interest. I wondered how long it would last, how long it would take for old habits to resurface, for resentment to turn back into disrespect. And most importantly, I wondered if this kind of relationship was what I truly wanted for the rest of my life. Would it be possible to rebuild trust after such a betrayal? And even if it were, did I want to continue in this pattern where my primary identity was that of mother and grandmother, always available, always ready to sacrifice my own needs for others? I spent weeks reflecting, examining my options, considering my future. One afternoon, while sorting through some old photographs, I found one of Robert and me on our honeymoon in Savannah, Georgia. We were so young, so full of dreams and plans. Robert always talked about retiring there, drawn by the historic architecture, the leafy parks, the slower pace of Southern life. "When the children grow up and go their own way," he would say, "we'll go ours." I stared long and hard at that photo, at our smiling faces, at the promise of a future we never got to share. And then I realized the children had grown up. They had gone their own way, paths that in Michael's case led away from everything Robert and I held dear. Maybe it was time for me to go my own way too. I started researching Savannah, real estate prices, cost of living communities for people my age. The more I read, the more excited I became about the possibility. A new city, a new life, a new beginning. Far from the manipulation, the lies, the disrespect. A place where I could simply be Margaret, not the mother, not the mother-in-law, not the grandmother, but a woman with her own desires, interests, and dignity. I contacted a real estate agent in Savannah and listed my current home for sale. I didn't tell anyone in my family, not yet. This decision was mine and mine alone. In mid-May, I received an offer on my house lightly above my asking price. That same day, the Savannah real estate agent sent me photos of a charming, restored Victorian house just a few blocks from Forsyth Park, with a small backyard perfect for the rose bushes I'd always dreamed of growing. The universe is sending me signs, I thought, smiling to myself. I accepted both offers. It was official. In 6 weeks, I would start a new life in a new city. Now it was time to tell my family. I decided to do this during our next family therapy session, where we would have Dr. Klein's support in navigating any difficult reactions. When it was my turn to speak, I took a deep breath and shared my decision. I've sold my house in Boston. In 6 weeks, I'm moving to Savannah, Georgia. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael was the first to react, his face a mixture of confusion and alarm. Mom, you can't be serious. Savannah is over 1,000 miles away, far from everything, ... Far from family, that's precisely one of the attractions, I replied honestly. Ashley interjected her tone, a curious mix of panic and indignation. Margaret, that's absurd. You can't just move to a city where you don't know anyone, so far from anyone who could care for you. Dr. Klein raised her hand, interrupting what was about to become a barrage of objections. Let's give Margaret space to explain her decision. This is clearly a meaningful choice that she has considered carefully. I nodded gratefully and continued. Savannah was where Robert and I always planned to move after retirement. A dream we never realized together due to his untimely death. Now I have the opportunity to honor that dream, to begin a new chapter of my life. And yes, I'm aware of the distance, my age, the challenges of starting over in a new place. But I'm also aware of the possibilities, the freedom, the chance to finally live for myself after decades of living for others. Michael seemed genuinely hurt, perhaps for the first time, realizing the impact of his actions. Mom, I know we made terrible mistakes. We betrayed your trust, but we're trying to make things right. Please give us another chance. You don't have to go to such lengths to escape us. The pain in his voice was palpable, but there was also a note of self-centeredness that bothered me. Even now, he saw my decision primarily in terms of how it affected him, not as a positive choice for me. Michael, I replied gently, I'm not leaving to punish you. I'm not escaping. I'm leaving to live my life, a life your father and I dreamed of together. A life on my own terms in a place that represents a new beginning. Dr. Klein intervened again. This is an important opportunity for all of you to practice respecting each other's boundaries and choices. Margaret has every right to make this choice for her own life. The question now is, how can you as a family support her through this transition? Even if it's difficult for you, Ashley crossed her arms defensively. But what about the children? They'll be devastated. They'll barely see their grandmother. I recognized the emotional manipulation in her tactic, but calmly responded, the children will always be able to visit me. Savannah is beautiful, especially in the spring. They'll have their own room in my new home. And there are video calls, texts. We'll be connected even from a distance. Besides, what example are we setting for them if they suggest I should abandon my dreams to meet other people's expectations? The session continued with much discussion, some tears, mostly from Michael, and finally a reluctant acceptance of my decision. Dr. Klein helped us establish practical plans to maintain family ties despite the distant scheduled visits, regular phone calls, possibly even a shared vacation to Savannah. By the end, I felt exhausted but validated. I had defended my choice, maintained my boundaries, and still left the door open for an ongoing, albeit transformed relationship. Over the next few weeks, I immersed myself in moving preparations. I made several trips to Savannah to get to know the city better, meet with a real estate agent, and begin planning the decor for my new home. During one of these visits, I met Elaine, a 6'10" widow who lived next door to the one I had purchased. She immediately offered to show me around the neighborhood, introduce me to other residents, and share tips about local life. I moved here 5 years ago after I lost my husband, she told me over coffee at a lovely local cafe. Best decision I ever made. There's a whole community of women like us, here independent, active, starting new chapters. You'll love it. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and for the first time I felt truly excited not just to leave Boston behind, but to embrace all that Savannah had to offer. I began packing my things, sorting out what to take with me and what to donate or sell. It was a cathartic process. With each item I packed, I felt lighter, freer. I was literally and figuratively leaving the past behind, making room for new memories, new experiences. The children came to help me on the weekends, curious about my new home, making plans for their first visit. Their adaptation to the idea was surprisingly quick. The resilience of youth, I thought fondly. Grandma will have a room all to ourselves in Savannah. Emily explained to Christopher. "One afternoon, as they help me pack some books, and we can go on summer vacation. It'll be such an adventure." Michael and Ashley, on the other hand, still seemed to be processing the move. Therapy sessions continued, and while I was making genuine progress in some areas, I felt they hadn't yet fully accepted my independence. During my last week in Boston, I organized a small farewell party. I invited a few close friends, neighbors, and my book group. To my surprise, Michael and Ashley showed up bringing the kids and a parting gift, a beautiful set of gardening tools for my future rose garden. It was a small but meaningful gesture. "I hope you find happiness in Savannah, Mom," Michael said as he said goodbye, a gleam of tears in his eyes. I could tell that despite all his mistakes, he truly cared in his own imperfect way. "Thank you, son," I replied sincerely. "And I hope you find wisdom in Boston." He nodded, understanding my underlying message. Ashley, always harder to read, offered me a polite hug. "The kids will miss you," she said, still unable to express any personal feelings. I looked her straight in the eye. "And I will miss them. I hope you'll allow them to keep in regular contact with me." She nodded stiffly. "Of course. Dr. Klein made it very clear how important this is to them." It wasn't the warmest response, but it was honest, and honesty was significant progress in our complicated relationship. Harold also showed up at the party bringing a bottle of champagne and an envelope. "A parting gift," he explained, handing me the envelope. Inside were legal documents transferring full ownership of my old house to me. Necessary because it was still technically partially in Robert's name, and ensuring that all financial matters with Michael and Ashley were formally resolved. "Everything is in order," he said. "You are officially free to start your new life without legal baggage." I hugged him, grateful not only for his legal expertise, but for his unwavering support during this turbulent time. "I don't know how I would have gotten through all this without you," I confessed. He smiled. "You would have found a way, Margaret. You've always been stronger than you think." On the morning of my departure, I took a final tour of the empty house that had been my home for decades. Each room held memories, some sweet, some bitter, all parts of who I had become. In the master bedroom, I paused for an extra moment, feeling Robert's presence almost tangible. "I'm doing this, darling," I murmured to the empty space. "I'm finally following our dream." For a moment, I could almost feel his approval, his silent encouragement. "Goodbye, old friend," I said, looking one last time at the walls that had witnessed so many chapters of my life. "You served this chapter of my life well." The moving company had already shipped my belongings to Savannah days earlier. All I had with me was a suitcase with a week's worth of clothes and a box containing my most precious treasures. Photo albums, Robert's love letters, a few sentimental objects I wouldn't entrust to strangers. Michael had offered to drive me to the airport, and this time I accepted. I felt it was important to him, a form of closure, perhaps even a symbolic gesture of support for my decision. The ride was silent at first, both of us lost in our own thoughts. Finally, near the airport, he spoke. "Mom, I want you to know that I understand now why you're doing this, and although I'll miss you, I'm happy for you." His voice shook slightly. "What happened with the money, with all the lies? I have no excuses. I can only say that I lost myself somehow. I let material things, status, Ashley's influence. Well, I let all of that become more important than the values you and Dad taught me." It was the most honest admission he had made without the pressure of therapy or legal threats. "Thank you for saying that, Michael," I replied, touching his arm gently. "It means a lot to me." At the airport, while waiting to board, I received a text message from Ashley. I hesitated before opening it, worried it was a final attempt at manipulation or a cold goodbye. But what I read surprised me, Margaret. "We've never had the best relationship, and much of that was my fault. I've realized watching you these past few weeks what it means to have the courage to follow your own dreams, even when everyone around you tries to convince you otherwise. It's a lesson I intend to teach Emily. I'll never be perfect, and we may never be truly close. But I respect what you're doing. I wish you every happiness in your new life. Ashley." The words seemed sincere, devoid of the condescending or manipulative tone I'd come to expect from her. Perhaps my departure had sparked some genuine reflection. Or perhaps she was just relieved to be rid of her meddling mother-in-law. Anyway, I politely replied, "Thank you, Ashley. I hope you and Michael find your way to being the best versions of yourselves for the sake of the children. My heart remains open to a relationship based on mutual respect." The flight to Savannah was uneventful, giving me time to reflect on the journey I was about to begin. At 65, I was essentially being reborn. Not as a mother, not as a mother-in-law, not as a grandmother, though these roles remained important to me, but as Margaret, a woman with desires, dreams, and rights of her own. The flight attendant announced our descent to Savannah, and I felt butterflies in my stomach, not with fear, but with excitement. As the plane touched down, silent tears streamed down my face. "I did it, Robert," I thought. "I'm here. I'm realizing our dream." Elaine was waiting for me at the airport just as she'd promised. "Welcome to your new home," she exclaimed, hugging me warmly as if we were old friends, not just recent acquaintances. "The car is waiting, and I've prepared a little snack to help you settle in. I know the first few hours in a new place can be a bit disorienting." Her kindness touched me deeply. This was the kind of genuine connection I'd longed for, not based on familial obligation or shared histories, but on mutual respect and consideration. On the way to my new home, Elaine pointed out local landmarks, shared stories about the neighborhood, and mentioned several groups and activities I might consider. "We have a gardening club that meets on Tuesdays, perfect for your rose bushes, and a monthly reading group at the library. That's wonderful. Oh, and don't forget the painting classes at the community center. It's never too late to discover hidden talents." My new house was even more charming in person than in the photos. Original hardwood floors, tall windows, a small but elegant front porch where I could imagine sitting on warm summer afternoons watching the neighborhood go by. The backyard, though smaller than it appeared in the photos, was perfect for my future rose bushes. The moving company had delivered everything as scheduled, and my belongings waited in organized boxes, ready to transform this house into my new home. "It's absolutely perfect," Elaine said, feeling breathless with excitement. "I can truly see myself living here, building a new life." Elaine smiled, squeezing my shoulder gently. "And it will be a wonderful life, Margaret. I'm sure of it." Over the next few days, I dedicated myself to this transformation with renewed energy and enthusiasm. I painted the walls in soft colors I'd always wanted but never dared use in the old house. I arranged the furniture according to my personal taste without needing to consider anyone else's opinions. I planted the first rose bushes in the garden, knowing it would take time for them to fully bloom just like my new life. Elaine introduced me to several neighbors, all of whom were welcoming and interested in meeting the new resident. There was Janet, a retired teacher who organized a book club, Carlos and David, a couple who had moved from Chicago 5 years earlier and now ran a small local art gallery, and Sophia, an energetic 17-year-old widow who taught Tai Chi in the park every morning. "You should join us tomorrow," Sophia insisted. "It's perfect for keeping your body active and your mind calm." I accepted the invitation even though I had never practiced Tai Chi before. It was part of my new commitment to myself, saying yes to new experiences, expanding my horizons. Discovering parts of myself that had lain dormant for decades. I explored my new neighborhood, met neighbors, discovered the corner cafe that served the best breakfast, the cozy bookstore a few blocks away, the park, where seniors played chess on concrete tables beneath ancient trees. I signed up for a local history course at the community college and gardening classes at the extension center. Little by little, I began building a new social network, not to replace my family, but to complement my life in ways that had been absent for too long. I kept in regular contact with Emily and Christopher via video calls, listening to their school stories, sharing glimpses of my new home, planning their summer vacation visit. Even Michael called weekly, our conversations cautious, but gradually warming. One afternoon, while watering my newly planted rose bushes, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Elizabeth, my daughter, who lived in Seattle, with whom I rarely spoke. "Mom, Michael told me about your move to Savannah," she said, her voice a mix of surprise and something that sounded like admiration. "I have to admit I'm impressed. I never imagined you would take such a bold step. We talked for almost an hour, the longest conversation we'd had in years. Elizabeth told me about her work, her recent divorce, her own struggles to redefine her identity at 30. "You're inspiring me, Mom," she admitted at the end of the call. "Maybe it's not too late to change, to claim what we really want in life." "It's never too late, honey," I replied, feeling a new bond forming between us. "We just need the courage to take the first step." That conversation with Elizabeth was an unexpected turning point. 2 weeks later, she surprised me by announcing that she would be taking a leave of absence from work to spend a month with me in Savannah. "I need a break from my life in Seattle," she explained. "Time to think, to reevaluate, to decide what I really want from here on out. And I'd like to get to know this new version of my mother that's causing such a stir in the family." Her visit would partially coincide with the children's, creating a rare opportunity for a family reunion. Not around Michael and Ashley, but around me in my new territory. The idea filled me with a joy I hadn't expected to feel so soon after the move. When July arrived, my Savannah home became the center of a family reunion I never imagined possible just a few months earlier. Elizabeth arrived first, bringing a nervous but hopeful energy. "This city is lovely, Mom," she commented during our first stroll through the historic district. "I can see why you and Dad dreamed of moving here." A week later, Michael brought Emily and Christopher for his promised visit. It was the first time in years my two children were together in the same space and watching them rebuild. Their own connection was an unexpected joy. The children were ecstatic about Savannah, about my home, about the extra attention they were receiving from both me and the aunt they barely knew. "Grandma, your garden will be beautiful when all those roses grow," Emily observed, helping me water the plants on a warm morning. "Can we come back in the spring to see Ashley didn't come, citing work commitments she couldn't cancel?" But the truth, which we all tacitly acknowledged, was that her absence made the visit more relaxed, more genuine. Michael seemed different away from her, more open, more like the son I knew before his marriage. One night while the children were asleep and Elizabeth had left for an event at the local art gallery with my new friends Carlos and David, Michael and I sat on the front porch drinking iced tea and observing the stillness of the summer evening. "You were right to move, Mom," he said softly. "I've never seen you so at peace, so yourself." I smiled, touched by his observation. "Thank you for noticing, Michael, and for supporting my decision even though it was difficult at first." He nodded thoughtfully. "Things with Ashley aren't good," he admitted after a long silence. "Therapy helped clarify some things, but it also exposed deeper issues. I don't know if we'll ever get through it." I wasn't entirely surprised by his confession. I'd noticed how he avoided talking about Ashley during the visit, how he seemed to visibly relax when he wasn't on the phone with her. "I'm sorry, son," I said sincerely. "I know how much you've invested in this marriage, how much you love the kids. But sometimes recognizing that a relationship isn't healthy is the first step to finding true happiness for everyone involved." He nodded, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Seeing you make this difficult decision to move, to prioritize your own happiness after years of sacrifice, it made me question my own choices, my own compromises, and realize that maybe it's time to make some changes too." I didn't press for details, respecting his process. Instead, I simply reached out and squeezed his hand, offering the quiet support he clearly needed at this vulnerable moment. In late July, as my rose bushes bore their first modest but promising blooms, the family visit came to an end. Elizabeth returned to Seattle with plans to reevaluate her career and consider a possible move, perhaps not to Savannah, but somewhere that resonated more with her true desires. "You taught me a valuable lesson, Mom," she said as she said goodbye. "It's never too late to start over, to choose yourself." Michael and the children left with promises to return soon, possibly for Thanksgiving. I watched them leave with a mixture of sadness and contentment, sad to see them go, glad to know our bonds remain strong, perhaps even stronger than before, now based on healthier terms. "You will always have a place here," I promised, hugging them one last time before they left. "A place where you can simply be yourselves, just as Grandma is now simply herself." Emily smiled, her eyes shining with understanding beyond her years. Let's go back soon, Grandma. I want to see how your roses grow. Autumn arrived in Savannah with a gentleness I'd never experienced in Boston. The mornings were crisp and inviting, perfect for Tai Chi classes with Sophia and 6 other women of varying ages. The afternoons were ideal for exploring new corners of the city or for Janet's book club meetings where I discovered a taste for contemporary literature I'd never had time to cultivate before. I developed a routine I enjoyed. Local history classes on Mondays, volunteering at the community library on Wednesdays, movie nights with new friends on Fridays. I started keeping a journal, something I hadn't done since I was a teenager, recording not only the day's events but also reflections on my journey, insights into my own evolution. In one of these entries I wrote today, I completed 6 months in Savannah. 6 months of independence, of self-discovery, of creating a life based not on what others expect of me, but on what I want for myself. The path has not been easy. There have been moments of doubt, of loneliness, of questioning. But I wouldn't trade this new freedom for anything in the world. I've learned that it's possible to love my family from afar, maybe even love them better that way. I've learned that it's never too late to start over, to redefine the terms by which we live. And most importantly, I've learned that respect for ourselves and for others, it's not an optional luxury, but the foundation of any healthy relationship. In October, I received a surprising call from Michael. His voice sounded different, more calm, more mature. Mom, Ashley, and I have decided to separate, he revealed after exchanging the usual pleasantries. It was a mutual decision, really. Therapy helped us realize that we have fundamentally different values, incompatible life goals, and that perhaps the children are better off with parents, separated but at peace, than together in constant conflict. I was momentarily speechless, genuinely surprised by the quick resolution of what he had hinted at during his visit. How are you feeling? I finally asked, concerned for his emotional well-being. Honestly relieved, he replied, his voice revealing a lightness I hadn't heard in years. Sad for what could have been worried about the kids, sure, but mostly relieved. Like I could finally breathe after years of slowly suffocating. We talked for over an hour with a new quality of honesty between us. Michael talked about his plans to buy an apartment near their current home, so the children could easily transition between the 2 homes. He mentioned that he was considering a career change, something less corporate, more aligned with his true interests. Maybe teaching, he said thoughtfully. I've always enjoyed working with young people, making a difference in a more direct way. Before we hung up, he asked a question that demonstrated how much he had grown. Do you think Dad would be disappointed in me for not being able to hold my marriage together? I reflected for a moment before answering, wanting to offer the truth he deserved. Your father valued honesty above all else, Michael, and the courage to make difficult choices, even when painful. I think he would be proud of you for finally choosing authenticity, for prioritizing the children's well-being above appearances. It's not a failure to recognize when a relationship has ended. Sometimes it's the bravest thing we can do. As Christmas approached, I faced a decision. Michael had invited me to spend the holidays with him, and the children in Boston. Ashley would be with her own family. Part of me longed to see my grandchildren, to experience the Christmas traditions I'd always cherished. Another part was reluctant to return to the scene of so many painful memories. After much deliberation, I proposed a compromise. They would come to Savannah for Christmas, experiencing my new world, my new life. To my delight, Michael readily accepted. And to my surprise, Elizabeth also announced she would join us. I've spent the last few Christmases alone or with friends, she explained. This year, I want to be with family, real family. And so on Christmas Eve, my Victorian home in Savannah was filled with familiar voices. Michael, the children, and Elizabeth arrived, bearing gifts, food, and a festive spirit long absent from our family gatherings. Together, we decorated a modest but elegant Christmas tree in the corner of the living room. We prepared dinner in my kitchen, everyone contributing a dish. I also invited my new friends Elaine, Sophia, Janet, Carlos, and David to join us for dessert, creating a harmonious blend of past and present blood family and chosen family. Around the table, as I raised my glass in a toast, I looked at the gathered faces and saw something that had been missing for too long: genuine joy. Not the forced joy of people trying to keep up appearances, but the authentic joy of people being truly themselves, connecting with an open heart. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, feeling strangely emotional. "To new beginnings. To relationships based on mutual respect and genuine love. And to the courage to follow our hearts even when the path seems daunting." "To courage," Elizabeth repeated, raising her glass. "And to the best mother anyone could ask for," Michael, with unshed tears in his eyes, added, "and to learning from our mistakes. To growing and becoming better people." The children, of course, were more interested in their gifts than in emotional gifts. After dinner, we sat around the tree opening presents, laughing and creating new memories. The gift that touched me most came from Michael and Elizabeth together, a photo album documenting the family's best moments over the years, including several blank pages at the end. "For your new adventures," Michael explained. "For the next phase of our family story." Flipping through the pages, I saw our family history with new eyes. Yes, there was pain, betrayal, disappointment, but there was also love, joy, moments of genuine connection. And now we were on the threshold of a new chapter, one written with the hard-learned lessons of the past, but not limited by them. When the family left a few days later, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. Not the peace of surrender or complacency, but the peace that comes from being aligned with your own values, living authentically, and establishing relationships based on solid foundations. I returned to my routine in Savannah, but now enriched by the renewal of family ties. I continued my classes, my volunteer work, my rose garden. I continued exploring the city that had welcomed me, discovering new and charming corners, making new friends, and building a community around me. The following spring, my roses bloomed in full bloom, filling the small garden with lush color and fragrance. Sitting on my garden bench, admiring them with a cup of tea, I reflected on the remarkable journey of the past year. From the humiliation of that birthday party to regained independence. From despair to hope. From victimhood to empowerment. The roses were a perfect metaphor: beauty that emerges from adversity, growth that requires both nurturing and pruning, flowers that only appear after the thorns have already formed. In my journal that night, I wrote, "Robert's roses are finally blooming, and so am I." And I discovered that, like these flowers, my best years may be just beginning. A few weeks later, I received surprising news. Elizabeth had decided to accept a job offer in Charleston, just 2 hours away from Savannah. "It's not a coincidence," she admitted over the phone. "After Christmas, I realized how much I missed you, how much I wanted to be closer. This opportunity came along, and it felt perfect, a fresh start for me, not far from you." Michael also shared his own turnaround. He had been accepted into a master's program in education, taking the first steps toward his new career as a teacher. "And the lawyers finalized the divorce settlement," he added. "Civilized, balanced with joint custody of the kids. Ashley is well-being Ashley, but she's more reasonable now that we're not together all the time." I felt a surge of pride for my children, for their courageous decisions to change their lives, to seek greater authenticity and fulfillment. In a way, my own journey had paved the way for it. They're showing that it's never too late to reclaim your right to happiness. My story doesn't end here, of course. It's a story in progress, evolving every day with new discoveries, new challenges, new triumphs. But if there's one lesson I hope you take away, it's this: it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to set boundaries, to demand the respect you deserve. It's never too late to start over, to reinvent yourself, to create a life based on your own terms. And perhaps most importantly, it's never too late to flourish. If you identified with my story, leave a like to help me reach more people who may be going through similar situations. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to set boundaries with people close to you? What was that experience like for you? Subscribe to the channel for more real stories like this, accounts that show there is always hope, always the possibility of transformation, even in the darkest moments. And remember, just like my roses, you too deserve to bloom in your own time, in your own way. displaying all the vibrant colors that make you who you are.